A little information on some bets that are starting to come in. This is from the folks over at Caesars. They're tabulating how many $1,000 bets have come in so far this season. And there's one team that's got more than Georgia, which is not surprising. It's just which team that is. Ohio State is at seven. There are 17 people who have bet $1,000 or more that Ohio State will win the national championship. There are 10 people that have bet that Alabama will win the national championship and are wagering $1,000 or more. But would you believe, it's hard to believe this, that three different people have bet $1,000 or more on Utah State to win the national championship. Only two people have bet on Georgia, one on Oklahoma, one on NC State, one on UCF, and three on Texas A&M. I'm going to tell you that NC State and UCF are sucker bets, and so is Utah State. So that's what I would say to you about those bets. But it is kind of interesting that some of these odds people may view them as value bets. That's kind of the way that a lot of college football bet or a lot of bettors in general look at things. But like right now, Alabama is at plus 200 to win the national championship. Georgia, you can get either plus 250 or plus 300 to win the national championship. Everybody else is at least double worse than that. So you get better value betting for Ohio State, and I would say that's one reason why Ohio State has the most $1,000 bets at 17, according to Caesars. Now this isn't everybody who's bet. Um, Other folks have bet as well, but this is just what Caesars is telling us. Like for instance, Texas A&M has got 22 to 1 odds. That's roughly plus 2,000. So that's almost not quite 10 times worse odds. Well, better odds, however you want to look at it, that they would win the national championship versus Georgia. So why pick Utah State? Why kind of go out there on a limb and try to win a huge. I mean, they're 100 to 1 according to Caesars. I mean, they are not close to being anywhere close to winning the national championship according to odds. Excuse me, they were 1,000 to 1 yesterday. And that'd be a huge $1 million on your $1,000 bet. Okay, somewhere something like that. But that is bizarre. Uh, I just don't see how they win the game that I'm about to talk about, which is the second game of the season for Utah State is the Alabama game. They play UConn to start the season at home, but they go to Tuscaloosa, and that would be like a shocking result. Now, Utah State a season ago had a pretty good team, and a lot of folks feel like they're going to be a pretty good team this season. They were an 11-3 team, two losses in the league, a one to Boise, which is not really any shameful thing. Then they lost to Utah, they got blown out by Wyoming, and then of course they lost to Utah, BYU, who is not in their league. They beat Oregon State to start the season, but to end the season. But I don't see any way. I think these are all sucker bets unless you're betting Bama, Georgia, or Ohio State, even Clemson at 1,200. I mean, you put down a dollar, which you can't do, but let's just say you did. You're not that you're just throwing the money away. The odds of first of all, these are not great bets. Um, they are almost always sucker bets because you have to go through the gauntlet of the season to get it to pay off, and often um, the team that you pick does not win the national championship. It's not a black or white thing like picking a game where either a team covers the line or they don't. with this, I mean, you're in for the roller coaster of the season, and maybe that's what people want. Someone bet $1,000 on Oklahoma, which would pay almost $35,000, but they're not going to win the national championship. I mean, these are sucker bets. Florida at 6,000 to 1. I mean, it's just not going to happen. So it was curious to see. I mean, I wonder what the conversation between that bettor and their significant other was. I mean, were they saying, "Oh, I'm going to take this $1,000 and bet it on Utah State"? I don't know. I mean, they are not as still, even with these massive bets, are still not as likely to win the national championship as Georgia Tech. I mean, think about it too, y'all. Think about it this way. And I know this is not the typical thing we talk about, but if Georgia were to open the season well, they're opening against Oregon, okay? So Oregon right now is at just behind the Gators or right on top of them at plus 5,000 to win the national championship. Well, if they beat Georgia, they're going to move up to like plus 1,000 or something. They're going to be right around where Clemson's at or Texas A&M. But the likelihood is they're not going to win that game. So you're just, you know, if you can take $1,000 and place a bet like that, that means obviously you're a very significant bettor. You think you know something that certainly I don't know after watching Nick Saban over the last 14 years. I don't has Alabama had a season opening loss under Nick? Because I don't think they have. And I remember sitting at the Clemson Bama game in 2008 thinking Alabama's going to have a hard time in this game. They beat Clemson's doors in that game. They beat their brains in, and that was the beginning of their march over the last 14 seasons or 13 seasons, whatever it's been. Nick doesn't lose games like that. In fact, they nearly always win those games going away at the beginning of the season. And there's a reason why that's the case to me. Um, but I think to lay a bet down like that, it's always interesting to see what folks do when it comes time. It's put up or shut up time. I mean, $1,000 to net a million. There were times in graduate school in economics and finance where we were taught that you need to go out and buy a lottery ticket when it's time because you'd be crazy not to because the odds are so in your favor. But like I'm just looking back and like '08, they beat a top 10 Clemson team, a team that certainly was not a top 10 team. Then the season later, they beat Virginia Tech, a top 10 Virginia Tech team. In 2011, Alabama, excuse me, 2000. See, Nick always tries to have these big games at the beginning of the season. And in 2012, they beat Michigan by almost 30, top 10 Michigan by almost 30 at the beginning of that season. And Kirby's trying to do the same thing, playing these big games. Virginia Tech was not ranked when they beat their brains in 2013, but then they went to go to College Station a week later and won that game. Johnny Manziel and all the hoopla there. It's just, to me, it's a total sucker bet. You are trying to figure out how to take $1,000 and throw it in the trash. They beat Wisconsin, number 20 Wisconsin by 14 in Dallas in 2015, the year they won the national championship in 2016. They beat USC's brains in. I mean, they beat their brains in 52-6 in 2017 when Georgia played them in the national championship game. If you remember, that was that epic 1-2, 1-3, whatever you want to call it, Florida State Alabama game where Bama won the game 24-7. There couldn't have been a bigger game to start the season than that game. So, when you look at it this year, the first game of the season that most people are going to talk about is Michigan, Notre Dame. Excuse me, Ohio State, Notre Dame. That's going to be a huge game to open the season. But it's going to be Georgia, Oregon right after that. And sort of these nutball lines that we're seeing. I mean, Nick has never lost an opener at Alabama. He hasn't. And Kirby's never lost an opener at Georgia. And often they're playing these pretty legitimate foes at the beginning of seasons. I mean, Georgia played Clemson this past year, a top 5 matchup. North Carolina, number 16 or 20, North Carolina, whatever they were at the time, and Georgia wins that game kind of going away in the fourth quarter. They've not all been openers for Georgia, but the second week of the season with Notre Dame in 2017, South Carolina in 2018. In 2019, you had the Notre Dame game deeper in the season, so 19 wasn't as good for Georgia on that stuff as possible. But would you take $1,000 to bet that Georgia wins the national championship? You tell me. Link are down below. Thanks for watching.